If you flip to the back of a scientific journal article, you're likely to find pages and pages that look like these. The references section. Now, these are a list of articles that are referred to or referenced in the paper that you're reading right now. And they're often written by other people than the article that you're reading, and they provide supporting evidence and other details. Now, there are a whole bunch of rules about references. We're going to go over those right now. First, I want to just discuss what's the purpose of having these references. What they allow others to do is to find out more from the sources that you used. Maybe there's some really good information that you didn't have a space to include in your paper, but that other people could benefit from. More details. They allow people to reproduce your work because they'll be looking at some of the same resources that you were looking at. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, they allow others to check up on you. Do the sources actually say what you claim they do? So let's look at an example. This is a pretend snippet from a journal article that I created. It's not real, but it's about earthquakes in the town of Parkfield. Many of you may have heard of those, how there are earthquakes that happen pretty often there. And so here's what this person wrote in this pretend journal article. Earthquakes recur in Parkfield, California, and the most recent event was in 2004. The next earthquake in Parkfield will be 2029, and it will be larger than all previously recorded events. And then there's a citation to Michel et al. 2018. So we want to figure out, how did they find this out? How did they know that the next earthquake is going to be in 2029? And how did they know how big it was? I want to know, so I'm going to have to look in the references. But of course, with the information that I've given you just on this screen here, I don't know if you can find it. Can you find it with just the information here, Michel et al. 2018? Stop and try and do a Google search. What about if I tell you that the authors are Michel and Avuak? Does that help you? See if you can stop and do a Google search now. Well, you realize that, this is not working. There's several papers by these people. There's a whole bunch by Michel that have nothing to do with Parkfield. And maybe if I tell you that the source is the Bulletin of the Seismological Society, you can start tracking it down. But it would be a whole lot easier if I gave you all the details at once. If I gave you this, the list of all the authors, the year, the title, so you can read it. You don't even have to go read the article. You get a lot of it in the title here. The journal that it's from, the volume, this journal has been publishing for 108 years, and so they are in the 108th year here. Which issue of that year? So maybe that's the January issue. And what pages? 19 to 38. So you can now go and find that really easily in a library, paper library, or online if you search for this information. When we do that, though, let's see if we can try and accomplish our purposes. Can we check up on what the sources actually say? So the statement's down here. If we look at this now, the next earthquake in Parkfield will be in 2029, and it will be larger than all previously recorded events. So when we actually look at the actual source, it says Parkfield segment may host occasional large earthquakes. May host occasional large earthquakes. That's different than all previously recorded events are going to be smaller. And when you look here, it's earthquakes occur about every 25 years. That's different than saying 25 years more than 2004. So this statement up at the top, totally and completely false. That's the power of references, is when you can actually go to the source and check and see if you agree that they've interpreted things correctly. It's all based in the right information, but not presented in a fair and balanced way. Now, this was an extreme case where I intentionally obscured things, but maybe there's an author that just misreads something, or even there's a debate about how to interpret things, and they interpret it one way, but they don't tell you about the other possible interpretation. We want to be able to get around that by giving people access to our sources directly. So now that we know we want to give other people access to the articles, we need to help them find them in the easiest way possible. We need to allow others to track down our sources, so we need to give them all the information, and the best way to do that is to follow a standard format that everybody else follows. So if you look at this particular example of a reference for the article that we cited before, it has the author's last names, some of their first initials, a period, a comma. There's the year of this is inside parentheses. There's the title in here. Then we have the journal is in italics, and then these last numbers at the end, if you know the format of this, you know that that's supposed to be where the page numbers appear. So that's how I know that it's pages 19 to 38. And it's a very standard format that this particular journal uses, and it's important that I follow that. One of the ways we often search for articles that we're going to cite and include in our journal articles is using a tool like Google Scholar. This is scholar.google.com, and there's a little search bar there just like there is for regular Google, but this just searches peer-reviewed journals that are high quality and usually really good for including in citing of other peer-reviewed journals. And so I searched first an article on earthquake preparedness, and this one popped up. And let's say I want to reference this in my article. So I need to get that format just right so that other people can get all the information they need. And I can tap this little quotation mark here in Google Scholar, and it will pop up with a list of different ways that I can format the citation. One is for the MLA format, one is for the APA format, one is for the Chicago Manual of Style, and they all differ by a tiny little bit, and we'll look at those differences in a few moments. But you might be asking, which is better? Why would I choose one or the other? And the truth of the matter is, there is no benefit to one over the other. They're simply an agreed upon standard, and whatever journal that you're using has an agreed upon standard, and you need to follow it exactly as it is. It's kind of a little bit of academic snobbery. People get very picky about this when you don't put things in. I've had papers that I've submitted, and I had little errors in my references, and we'll talk about what type of little errors there were, and they were sent back to me. They would not even look at the article until I fixed those references to put them in the correct format. And like I said, it's academic snobbery, and it's kind of crazy. One could even argue stupid, but it's what we've got. And we've got these rules. We've got to learn how to follow them so that we can succeed in academia or any other arena that has some sort of standard format. So let's take a look at some variations. This is an article by Dr. Lozos from our department, and I chose a few different examples of different citation formats or reference formats, and all of the same article. You can see it's all by Julian Lozos. It's called Small Intermediate Fault Segments. You can see that in all of them. It's in Geophysical Research Letters. So what I want you to do is pause the video in a moment and make a list of all the differences you can spot. It's kind of like one of those games. What are the different things that differ between all of these examples here? And then come back with me and we'll discuss them together. All right, here's my list. Did you get all of these? You have, in some cases, the first name, and in other cases, initials. Sometimes you have the last name, comma, first name, and sometimes you have first space last. Sometimes there's a period after the initials, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a space between initials, of your first initial and your middle initial, and sometimes there's no space. Sometimes you have the word and to represent and sometimes you have this little symbol here. Sometimes they'll list a whole bunch of authors, and other times they'll stop after maybe 3 or 4 or 5 authors, and you'll just write the Latin words et al., which basically means and everybody else. And that's done in italics because it's in Latin. Sometimes the year will be listed near the beginning, sometimes at the end, sometimes the title's in quotes, sometimes it's not. Sometimes things are written in title case, and sometimes they're written in sentence case, which is where you just put the very first letter as a capital letter in the whole sentence, but the rest of them are lowercase. And title case, all the first letters of every word are in uppercase. What's the punctuation around the year? Is it parentheses? Is it a period? Is there punctuation after the title? What does it look like? Is it a period? Is it a colon? Do you put the journal in italics or not? Do you abbreviate the journal, or do you write out the full journal name? The volume or issue, do you have the letter V to represent volume, or do you just leave that out? Same thing for issue. That's often done as number, NO. Do you put the page number with the letters P or the 2 letters P? Or some citation formats actually don't list the page numbers. In many journals, the dash that's used, if you have pages 19 to 39 like we had before, that's actually not the regular dash. It's actually called an M dash, which is a little bit longer. And on my computer on an Apple, I hold down the Option key and hit dash, and I can get this very special dash. But if you don't use that very special dash, people will notice it, and they might send your journal back. Sometimes they list only the first page of the article, and sometimes they list the full page range. And lastly, there's this thing called DOI, which is an electronic indicator. It's a special serial number, and sometimes that's listed for the journal article, and sometimes journals leave that out in the references. So these are all the possibilities that you can have. With all these dashes and dots and parentheses in different places, it can get very hard to keep track of. But thankfully, there's some technology tools so that we don't have to do this by hand anymore. It's no longer proof of your academic mettle. Let's use some technology. So there are a whole bunch of different software packages out there, websites and things. This is probably one of the easiest ones to use. It's called CiteThisForMe.com. And the very first thing that you need to do is you need to tell it which format you want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this citation style button here and search for the Geological Society, and I can just stop there. Oh, the Geological Society of America format. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that it's updated my citation style to that. So every time I copy and paste references, it's going to be able to use that correct format for me. So next, let's go ahead and add a reference. We'll make a reference to that journal article that we were looking at about Parkfield. So let's click on Journal. And now here, I can just go ahead and type in the title of the article. I had it already copied from the article itself. Hit the search button. And here it is. Here it comes back with Mikhail and Avuak and all those other authors. That's it. So let's hit the Cite button. Great, we've got that one. So next, let's go ahead and see if we can hit Continue here. It's just going to check and make sure that we've got all the information that we want. Now the year, I'm not sure if it was 2017 or 2018. If we go over here, it looks like it was 2017 and I had it wrong before. See how easy it is to make mistakes. So we'll go back over here and keep that. And go ahead and hit the Complete Citation button. And we're done. Let's go ahead and add another new reference. The effects of large destructive local earthquake on earthquake preparedness. Let's see if we can search for that. Hit search, and there it is. Cite that one, go through, continue, check and make sure everything's right, looks good to me, hit complete citation, and now you can see it's creating our bibliography. It's doing it automatically in alphabetical form, and we can just go ahead and copy and paste it. Copy it. Then head over to a Word document and paste it right in, and there it is, all formatted properly for us. So that's how we're going to be dealing with our references. Much simpler than trying to go through them by hand.